A lot of people would say Harlan Coben is the Stephen King of thrillers. While I can't necessarily agree or disagree, I can definitely see where they come from. He has built quite the roster in the subgenre of small suburban tragedy, conceals, sprawling conspiracy, and I Will Find You is his newest contribution to that cinematic universe of missing people, who are most definitely and absolutely not as missing as everyone assumes. The new Netflix adaptation has everyone quite stirred because the showrunner, Robert Hull, kept the emotional skeleton of the 2023 novel, but swapped out quite a few internal organs, rewriting the finale completely. I know, you are probably thinking, why does it even matter? We already know book-to-TV series adaptations never work out. But here's the thing, this one was intentionally done. So today we will be talking about all the differences between the show and the book, and see how every little change mattered. Grab your corkboard and some string because it is about to get messy. The show turns whodunit to, wait, who is this again? Let's hide him. Let's figure out a different way than the book went, is what showrunner Robert Hull told Screen Rant when describing the moment he and Harlan Coben decided to scrap the novel's reveal structure entirely, because the novel's approach to the central mystery would simply not translate well on TV. The novel is very generous with its secret, but because Coben's book lives inside the character's head, when you read, you already know who the villain is and how Matthew's fate went right off the bat. Much like Columbo, it is no longer about who did this, it is now more about why they did this and how it all unravels. But Hull felt that translating that structure to television would just not work. So instead of telling us where Matthew is right off the bat and watching everything unravel, he chose to leave us in the fog just like David. So yeah, Coben and Hull hid the culprit deliberately. Instead, they stacked a new layer of where on earth is he, which would keep the tension level high through and through. So, needless to say, this is a very different experience when compared to a novel that lets you peek behind the curtain early and watch the characters catch up to what you already know. On the page, the dramatic irony of readers waiting for David to catch up does a lot of heavy lifting, which is now done by viewers experiencing the puzzle firsthand with David. Hayden got a glow up because of Milo Ventimiglia. When a book is getting a movie or TV adaptation, the casting decisions are supposed to serve the book and the script that's already been written, but very rarely the script ends up bending to serve the casting. And for this show, it was Hayden. Once Milo Ventimiglia signed on, radiating this kind of trustworthy golden retriever energy, they just couldn't resist giving him more screen time. Coben himself was refreshingly candid about the reasoning too. Ventimiglia is so likable and lovable as a human being that hiding a villain behind that facade became the entire strategic point of the exercise. The more Hayden became part of the group, the harder the eventual reveal would hit when the show finally pulled the rug out. So when I watched the show, I was truly rooting for him. Every scene I saw him in, I felt for him. I felt bad for him. And then when we learned what he had been doing, I felt betrayed. And that was the whole point of the goddamn show. They created an elaborate and charming decoy, got an extremely lovable and charming actor to play that role, and it worked out. Plus, you have to admit, there is something so meta about this strategy. Ventimiglia spent years playing one of television's most beloved dads, so when you see his face, you do not expect anything bad from him. You are still somehow carrying the bias from his previous role into this role. So it was extremely easy for the showrunners to integrate Hayden as an ally for episode after episode until the big reveal. And that's why the betrayal hurts even more. The show and the book were basically raised in the same house. Under normal circumstances, you have a novel. The novel gets optioned. Then it gets turned into a television series years later, like, The Summer I Turned Pretty or Heated Rivalry. But here, the Netflix series came together when Coben was still working on the novel itself. Yep, the show was evolving alongside the novel, so in a way you can say that the book and the show are the same thing, but in two different timelines where the same thing happens, but in a different order, showing their personalities. And personally, I feel like that's what makes the show so much better than other novel-to-TV show adaptations, where directors decide to change things. Because unlike other ones where the director has to come up with the divergence and then make reasonable reasons to explain them away, which doesn't always work. Here we have the actual writer working on it. So if there are any questions, they can just go to the writer and figure it out directly instead of, the back and forth that usually happens. Plus, when you have a novel that came out years ago and has a fan base already, these changes don't often sit right with the fan. This one doesn't have that problem on a grand scale, at least. This kind of collaborative process is definitely a lot messier, but I feel like it results in something a lot more enjoyable too. David and Rachel's ending isn't in the book. If you have finished the finale, I am sure you are a little confused about whether David and Rachel are officially a couple now. But this moment is actually a confusion made by design. See, Hull said outright that in the final moments he wanted to make something that was completely out of bounds of the novel. He wanted to give viewers a lot of time with these two characters together, but not really telling them if these two characters were actually together. So the verdict remains unresolved. He wanted to frame it this way because in his eyes he felt that characters who shared this kind of journey are soulmates in their own way. It doesn't have to be romantic necessarily, but they are connected in one way or the other. He just wanted everyone to root for them. The novel, on the other hand, actually gave us a much clearer answer on whether they will or won't than the show. But I think this ambiguity kinda plays off rather nicely on the screen. I like that we don't really get a straight answer, which in turn makes the couple linger in our minds. And this is a very rare choice when you consider the current TV climate. Usually in TV, everyone gets a very bow-tying, in-your-face ending for characters because, hey, the audience wants a happy ending. We are gonna give them a happy ending. But by not giving us that kind of romantic level, the door is left open for the fans to argue about it online indefinitely, which, whether you like it or not, is a very good way of getting free marketing. Rachel gets promoted from sidekick to co-lead. In the novel, Rachel matters a lot, but the show wasn't going to just leave it at that. Hull specifically mentioned that the writers did not want the well-worn dynamic of the male lead doing all the heavy lifting, while the female character just exists purely to assist him. They wanted Rachel functioning as a genuine co-lead with her own complete arc, and Hull admitted that Rachel even ends up saving David considerably more often across the series than he saves her, basically flipping the damsel in distress math on its head. And we get an actual fleshed out story for Rachel too. We see her own struggles, her professional mistakes, her emotional arc, so basically it is more like the wrongfully convicted guy escapes prison and immediately becomes a supporting character in someone else's much more interesting story, which Coben himself could sign off on. Hull even said in interviews that this reshuffling was one of the coolest twists of the whole production, because suddenly the entire show was about somebody other than the person we all assumed it was going to be about. This again is very different structurally from the novel, and by giving Rachel's equal narrative weight, the whole show is kind of reshaped and the audience ends up rooting for her by the end. Coben himself said that he genuinely wanted the audience thinking about where each character ends up, and that would only work if more than one character was carrying narrative weight to be worth wondering about in the first place. The Gertrude Hayden showdown got a bigger stage. Every Coben production requires one scene where we see a veteran actor absolutely devour the scene, leave no crumbs, and for this show that honor belongs to Madeline Stowe's confrontation with her own son. Stowe can absolutely command a room she walks into, and both Coben and Hull appreciate that. Hull even confirmed that he wrote that entire episode and the speech sitting at its center by pulling material from the book. And in his opinion, what makes the moment land that way is the way it flips the usual instinct of parental protection completely inside out. Because here, protecting your child from the consequences of their actions goes horribly wrong. While the source material clearly planted emotional groundwork for this relationship, the show really built up to an entire lengthy monologue to top it off, and it's theatrical in a way the book couldn't have been. Coben has stated that when he watched Stowe deliver that material, it was genuinely captivating to witness because you just can't look away from it. I personally believe that if they went for the book material only, it wouldn't have worked out because a novel can describe a chilling monologue, yes, but there are some theatrics involved in the TV show scene, and Hull and Stowe together made that scene work magnificently. The epilogue ties up loose ends. The book handles differently. Instead of just covering the central mystery and moving on, as other TV shows do, the Netflix finale fast-forwards through the aftermath in one tidy montage. Roughly 8 months later, David's wrongful conviction got overturned. The truth of what happened to Matthew began spreading like wildfire through the media, and Rachel turned the entire ordeal into her own book thing. Meanwhile, Cheryl has moved on with her new baby and current husband, and the extended family gathers together for a funeral honoring David's father, who ultimately succumbs to colon cancer. As for Matthew, he is slowly piecing together his memory instead of snapping back to the child he was before any of this happened. I love that we got a nice wrapping up of every single subplot, even though it is in a condensed scene. Even though there are critics who found the finale a touch underwhelming, they have noted that there was a lot of hard narrative work done by the time the epilogue showed up. So this was more like a victory lap. That's a very particular kind of, and they all lived happily ever after. Now this may seem efficient or it may seem borderline reckless depending on how attached you were to any of those storylines, if you want me to be honest. No big romantic kiss on purpose. Given how much shipping energy David and Rachel generated across the 8-episode runtime, you would assume that in the finale, we would see them cash that tension out with a sweeping and dramatic embrace. You know, some kissing, some canoodling or whatever, but instead the show ends with a quiet handhold, which was a choice made specifically. Sam Worthington has said that he genuinely liked the ending, which avoided a grand romantic gesture in favor of something gentler and simpler. It's okay to be open-ended. That's hope, is what he told Time when asked about it. He argued that real power comes from small, understated gestures rather than a big, showy one, and Coben has echoed the same instinct, saying that he loved the way their hands touched at the very end, instead of being something bigger or more conclusively romantic. Britt Lower, too, has framed the choice in similar terms. She said that she loved that the show ended on that quiet and reflective note, instead of forcing a resolution, since both of the characters just went through profound loss and have come out on the other side with a deeper understanding of themselves and what actually matters to them. So by doing this hand-holding instead of kissing, the show effectively forces us to sit with that stillness, which I feel is pretty consistent with the show's overall tone. Cheryl's arc gets room to breathe because of how Coben writes. Coben has described his own adaptation process as something like weaving a tapestry, focusing on one character at a time, so that nobody in that ensemble gets shortchanged. And he actually pointed out Cheryl, David's ex-wife, as a clear example of that philosophy. He described the moment she and David finally laid eyes on each other again as emotionally charged, both while he was writing the novel and when everyone was filming the series. Because Coben paid attention to her. She is a background character, yes, but she isn't treated like that. She is treated as someone who is there, deliberately. And this choice is what directly shaped how much screen time Cheryl got in the show, compared to how the novel would have distributed her in the book. Coben has also talked about the practical mechanics of this deliberate approach to writing. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of trial and error, he told People, describing the system he has built over the years of doing this kind of adaptation work. As a result, we can see that Cheryl in the show gets a lot more screen time and more texture. I, for one, am really glad that she was able to move on with her new husband, finally starting her life anew. The show runs at a completely different speed. The novel's pace is rather leisurely. We take our time sitting with the characters, understanding why they did what they did and what they did not. But the show, on the other hand, has a higher pace. It feels like it has somewhere else to be. Critics have pointed out that individual episodes of this run ran noticeably punchier and more compact than the typical prestige thriller, barely covering the 30-minute mark. So the whole 8-episode season turned into something more binge-watchable. You watch it all in one setting and move on. This breathless rhythm is a part of the broader house style established across Coben's other Netflix adaptations more generally, but this time it was even brisker. Now, I am someone who likes it when there is a lot of action in the show I'm watching. I hate it when a show meanders and beats around the bush without getting to the point. But I also feel that when it comes to a thriller genre, this kind of point A to point B jump might be detrimental, because the relentless momentum might be a bit too overwhelming, especially when you want to sit with the pilot and figure out who done it with the characters. But with all that being said, I feel like this show definitely did this kind of brisk pacing a lot better than I expected. It managed to keep the audience engaged, and I like that not a single episode felt like filler, unlike From, which dragged everything on too much this season. And when I compare the show with the book, I like that the change of pace is present, because I feel like that's how it's supposed to be. You are supposed to do something different with the material when you are adapting it across media. Otherwise, why would I watch the show if I had read the book? I like that the novel earns its twists through pages of build-up, and the show does it with its momentum. And there you have it, guys. Coben and Hall clearly treated the source novel like an extremely detailed and occasionally negotiable suggestion, which made the show so much better. If you have read the book, which change surprised you the most? Did you hate the fact that David and Rachel did not share a kiss? Or did you like it that the show ended on such a poignant note? Drop your opinion in the comments, like and subscribe for more book versus show movie breakdowns like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!